last time we met, we talked a little bit about the protection of the spinal cord, including the vertebrae and the meninges. We have one last protective thing to discuss, and that is the cerebrospinal fluid. CSF is going to surround the spinal cord as well as the brain. And CSF is actually made by these specialized capillaries. So I have this pink thing right here, this pink thing up here. These guys are called choroid plexuses. There's actually 4 of them. They're always making CSF. CSF is going to be found in the subarachnoid space. So remember the space between the pia mater and the arachnoid mater, the subarachnoid space. God, that takes way too long to write with a mouse. The subarachnoid space, and we see that space in here, right there, where this light blue CSF is. So the CSF, it is going to protect the spinal cord and brain. It is also going to give it some physical support and buffer it. In other words, make sure the pH is correct. All right, let's keep on going and talk about some more spinal cord anatomy. The spinal cord is actually surprisingly short. It runs from the foramen magnum, so remember the hole in the bottom of the occipital bone. So from the foramen magnum up here, all the way down to the level of L1. So we know the spinal column, the spinal vertebrae, go all the way down to the bottom of the sacrum and the coccyx. So they're all the way down here. But there's this big gap here where the spinal cord has ended. Now we are going to find spinal nerves in that space, but the spinal cord is surprisingly short. A lot of people don't realize that. All right, let's do some more about this cord. Let's keep on going here. What we're going to do is divide the spinal cord up into 31 spinal segments. 31 spinal segments, okay? Each of those spinal segments will have a pair of nerves coming out of it. So one on each side, basically. So 31 spinal cord chunks, each giving rise to a pair of spinal nerves. Now, of those spinal nerves, 8 of them are considered to be cervical. 12 are going to be thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and then 1 coccygeal. Now, the 8 cervical is a little bit weird because we had 7 cervical vertebrae, so it's like there's 1 extra one. The 12 thoracic, well, that makes sense. There were 12 thoracic vertebrae. There were 5 lumbar vertebrae. There were 5 sacral vertebrae, and there is 1 coccyx. So what's kind of crazy to me is that the spinal cord ends at L1, which means all of these guys are going to have their nerves sort of before their vertebrae. So your lumbar and your sacral and your coccygeal nerves are all coming out of this lower region of the spinal cord. And then they all have to go down before they go out. Down before they go out. Because the spinal cord ends at such a high point. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Yeah. All right. We had 31 spinal cord segments and 31 spinal nerve pairs. And what that means is that we're basically going to divide our body into these 31 different chunks. Each one is going to get sensory information, motor commands associated with a different segment of the spinal cord. So like, for example, right here in the neck, it says C4 in this region right here, okay? So what that means is that stimuli, if you poke yourself in this region, that signal's going to go to your C4 cord. If you poke yourself a little lower, C5, a little lower, T1, etc. Couple things here. You don't have to memorize the locations of all of these dermatomes, these regions of the skin associated with spinal cord segments and nerve pairs. But we should have a general idea. Basically, neck, back of the head, shoulders and arms are basically cervical. Torso and a little bit of arms is basically thoracic. More or less the front of the leg and thigh, top and bottom of the foot is lumbar. The butt, the external genitalia, and the back of the thigh and leg is going to be sacral. So we should have that general idea, but we're not going to know the specific details here. Now you may be wondering, why does this guy have a blank face? Why are there no eyes here? Why is there no nose? Why is there no mouth? Well, the reason is, this is a map for spinal nerves. The face is going to be controlled by cranial nerves. All right. Let's talk some more about the spinal cord anatomy here. We know the spinal cord goes from the foramen magnum to L1, and there is this region in the cervical part of it, and this region in the cervical part of it is called the cervical enlargement. There is also, we see the cervical enlargement in the real cadaver as well, there is also a region called the lumbar enlargement, and these are basically thickenings of the spinal cord. Now here's the thing. Cervical, think arms. Lumbar, think legs. In fact, even better, cervical, think fingers. Lumbar, think toes. Fingers and toes require a lot of sensory input and a lot of motor output, so we need extra neurons for that. So these regions of the spinal cord have got to be extra thick. Hence, these enlargements. All right, guys, let's keep on going in mini lecture number 2. Now, we know the spinal cord ends at L1. And before the spinal cord ends, it is going to kind of taper. There is this cone shape to it. This tapering end of the spinal cord at L1 is the conus medullaris. We see that conus medullaris right here as well. Beautiful conus medullaris right there. Now, we know also that because the spinal cord ends early, spinal nerves have to travel downwards if they're lumbar or sacral or coccygeal. They got to travel downwards first before they exit the vertebral column. So what we're going to have here is a collection of spinal nerves below the cord, but in the vertebral canal. And that collection of spinal nerves is called the cauda equina. The cauda equina, this collection of spinal nerves below L1, below the conus medullaris, but before the spinal nerves have left the vertebral column. Why is it called the cauda equina? Well, cauda means basically butt region, equina means horse. So somebody thought this collection of nerves looked like the tail of a horse. All right, guys, that is going to end mini lecture number 2. I'll see you next time for mini lecture number 3. Bye-bye.